The agent rejected me and said, this book is too busy, too confusing, too much happens in it, so it's not publishable. When you've spent a whole year writing a book, it does seem very, very boring to you. I have had rejections from film studios, producers, because it's very hard to get a book made into a film.
You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper. Quick one, this episode forms part of a 3-part series where I interview fiction authors. This series includes interviews with Haley Jacobson, Jill Mansell, and Elizabeth Fremantle. After that, I'll be going back to interviewing nonfiction authors, so if that's what you're more interested in, worry not, your content will be coming back to you soon. Cool, enjoy the episode. Jill Mansell is a British author of romantic comedy, and her books have sold over 15 million copies worldwide, and she's written over 30 books. Her latest novel, The Wedding of the Year, was published this year, and I'm so excited for today's conversation. Jill, welcome to My Rejection Story.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's brilliant to be here.
It's an honor. Okay, to start off the conversation, could you tell me about a time in your life when you felt rejected?
What, book-wise?
Could be book or personal, whichever story strikes you as the most interesting or that you feel like you really want to share.
Well, I suppose when I first started writing novels, I mean, there's that huge thing, you choose an agent. And when I first started, it was before the internet existed. Well, not existed, but it wasn't available to all of us. And so I would use the Writers and Artists Yearbook to find agents and then sort of make a long list and make a short list and then finally choose the agents that you thought would like your book. And so the first time I sent my book off and got it rejected, I didn't feel too disappointed because I sort of didn't expect it to happen. Because we all know that the odds are great against it happening, especially the first time you send it off. But the agent rejected me and said, this book is too busy, too confusing, too much happens in it, so it's not publishable. So I wasn't going to do anything to it at that stage. So I sent it off to the second agent on my little list. And they said, this book is too boring and not enough happens in it.
Okay.
And so I thought, right, okay. I was working in a hospital. I had very, very little spare money. And sending off, it was quite a bid book. It was about 150,000 words, which I'd sort of printed off on the hospital photocopier. And you had to find the postage to send it off, plus the return postage for them to send it back when they didn't want it. So I'd done that twice, and I thought, well, I'll just try it one more time. And it made me want to carry on, but I couldn't afford to carry on with all this postage. So I thought I'll send it off one last time, and if this gets rejected again, then I'll just give up. And so I sent it off to the third agent on my list. And she phoned me up and said, I love it, and I know that I can sell it. So, wow. And that was it. And I'm still with her all these years later.
That is the most amazing rejection story because one, like how fortuitous that it worked out with that third agent since you'd resolved to give up that was rejected. But also what went through my brain while hearing that is that you got feedback from 2 agents, which right now for I think many authors is that even that alone would be an accomplishment because most agents just ghost authors and don't even respond, especially to first-time authors. So I would have taken that as like wow, like this was good enough that they even thought that they would give me some information.
I suppose. I don't think I'd even thought about that. But I think nowadays it's so easy for somebody to press a button and email 20 agents the same manuscript. And so I think possibly the agents get sent a lot more now than they did then, maybe.
Or your book was really good and, the agents saw something and that even
yes,
the ones
I think they said
rejected
nice things that, I could write and I could be funny and, they said nice things as well. but they just sort of said, this is why we can't publish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd always expected a letter to arrive to say, we'd like to publish it. And that never happened because it was a phone call in the end.
Oh, okay. So you didn't have the physical paper that brought that joy. And your relationship with your agent now, like, I feel like that's also a great kind of story, because that was many, many years ago and you still have a relationship with that same agent.
Absolutely, yes. We get along really well and, chat. And I don't know what it is. Sometimes you just click with people. And she's American as well, but she's lived in London for many, many years. But no, she's fine. I mean, and I've done pretty well out of my books. So I've seen no reason to change agents. I don't know why people do, but I'm happy with my agent, so I'm not going to change.
It worked out really well. I think that's like the best case scenario. I'm not actually American. I'm South African.
You? Oh gosh, yeah. I'm so sorry. God, I'm terrible at accents.
It's okay. I'm living in the UAE with my partner. So I guess I'm a bit all over the place. I talk to Americans, so maybe I picked up some of their twangs along the way.
Well, now as I'm really concentrating, yes, I think I just assumed. I don't know why.
Yeah, there's a lot of Americans. It's a big country. So can I ask you a little bit about Jill when she was a child, a little girl? I know you may not remember that much, but do you remember what her relationship to rejection was? Did she fear it? Did she seek it? Was it okay?
Oh, I don't think anybody seeks out rejection.
I don't know. I've spoken to some people on the podcast who said they did.
No, I had a happy enough childhood, and I did try and write a book once when I was about 10 years old, and Amazing. I've still got it. It's about sort of 20 foolscap pages, which is pretty good going.
Yeah.
But no, I don't remember anything particularly traumatic when I was growing up. We lived in a little tiny village, sort of in the middle of nowhere, and went to a little village school. I was quite badly bullied for the first year at that school because they were just a few children who'd grown up in that village and they'd never met anybody from outside that village. I turned up and it's sort of like an automatic thing to pick on you and bully the stranger, the new person, which they did. Maybe it was character forming, I don't know, but about after another year or so, a family of a girl and two boys moved into the village, and so I was allowed to join in with the gang, finally.
And did you bully the new boy and girl, or did you leave that to the rest of the school?
I think I'm not really a kind of a bully person, but no, I can't remember. I don't think I did anything awful.
Yeah. But would you say as a child you were risk averse, or do you remember taking risks, whether that was socially or career wise? I don't know, were you entering writing competitions, all that sort of thing?
So when are we talking? Sort of like, yes, about when I was like a teenager, I suppose I was more into entering competitions and writing competitions, art competitions. I loved trying to win art competitions, and gosh, it's a long time ago. It's really hard to remember.
It's okay, I know. And you started writing while you were working a job in clinical neurophysiology at the NHS.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about the shift from your full-time job to becoming a full-time novelist?
Well, I worked there altogether for 18 years and I absolutely loved it. It was testing the electrical activity in people's brains. So every day was different. We'd sort of go to different hospitals. We'd work in intensive care units or operating theatres, meet all kinds of people from all walks of life. And I loved it. But when you work for the NHS, you know how much money you're going to earn to the penny for the next 10 years and probably 20 years. And one day I'd forgotten to take a book in to read at lunchtime. And I went out to the waiting room and picked up a magazine. And there was an article in the magazine about 4 women who transformed their lives by becoming best-selling authors. So I thought, oh, I'll have a go. So basically, that article changed my life.
Yeah.
I joined a local evening class in creative writing, and that's how I started from there. And
I
I
love
later
that.
was giving a talk at a conference and met 2 other authors who were in the audience who had been inspired to start writing by that exact same article.
Wow, wow. I
I
love
know.
that story so much. It's just yeah, you saw a vision and you went after that vision. But what I wonder is that novelists often don't finish their books. Many writers want to write a book and they never finish a book. So you wrote this article, you knew this is something you wanted to do and give it a go, and then you wrote the novel. And I think we were just talking about in the green room, your first novel was disappeared off the face of the planet. So I'm curious about that phase of staying motivated to keep writing before you had a book deal, before you knew that you were going to be a successful published author. Do you remember much about kind of how you motivated yourself?
I just think I wanted to do it, and then I must have realised that I enjoyed doing it. More so then. But like I said, I didn't really expect to be published, because it's like saying, oh, I want to be, write music. I used to think George Michael, I knew that he'd written Last Christmas in 10 minutes flat whilst
Yeah.
watching football on the television. And when you work in the hospital and you're very poor and you can't ever afford to go in on holiday or anything like that, you just think, how can I make some money? What is the way? And so I thought the music idea would be fantastic, but I'm not musical. So when I came across, I thought, well, I used to write, stories when I was younger, and maybe I could write a book. Maybe I have that ability in me. When I was at school, English was one of my best subjects. So I thought it was something that it was feasible in a distant kind of way. So after the first book sort of vanished from the planet, I think after that, I just wanted to try again. So I joined this writing class by then, and I'd found the teacher back then was an author of very romantic fiction, like Harlequin fiction. Is that known everywhere? I don't know. It's in the States.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really good for me because, and I wrote about 4 or 5 books for that company, and they said, you write really well, but you keep putting humour in your books, and we don't want humour. We want real depth of emotion. And I wasn't able to give it the depth of emotion that they required. And the humour. I think they will use humour in books now, but it wasn't a thing then. So I then decided, after trying and failing with those, and they were giving me lovely rejection letters, detailed, saying, no, it doesn't work because this.
Yeah.
And it didn't put me off at all. I was thrilled to get some feedback. And then I thought, right, so this kind of ultra romantic fiction, it's not really my thing. So what would I like to read myself? And there's an author who is very famous over here in the UK called Gilly Cooper, who wrote romantic but also funny. And so I thought I would that was my natural, what I wanted to write. And so that was what I wrote. And that was the first book that was something that I actually wanted to write. And that's when I sent it off to agents to start the process.
What I'm taking away from this is how important it is to stick to your guns in a way, to know that what your natural strengths are and not try to pretzel yourself or change your style too much to suit what the market wants. Because
I think so. No, there's some writers that I know are really good at changing their personal style, and they will write under different names for different styles of books, and they will write historical novels, they'll write comic novels, thrillers. They are really good at they're chameleons.
Yeah.
Whereas I think I only have the one style of writing, so I'm glad that I stuck to it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's nothing wrong with changing your writing style, but I think kind of what I was getting at is if it feels wrong, if it feels like you're forcing this, it could have really, your career could have taken a very different direction if you'd really tried to force yourself into something.
Well, that's
that
why I
never
kept
felt
getting
right.
the rejections that I did.
Yeah.
When I was trying to write a style that didn't suit me. And that's something that I think other authors, it's worthwhile sort of searching around, looking for the actual style that suits you best and feels most natural.
So these rejections were coming from the publishers. So you had an agent representing you, and then she was pitching you to publishers, and you were getting these rejections from publishers. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, I found my agent by looking in the Writers and Artists Yearbook and making a short list of anyone that I thought might be interested in my style of writing. And I sent the manuscript off the first time to an agent who rejected me, but in a nice way. And basically, I still have the rejection letter, of course. You don't throw these things away, do you?
Yeah.
But they said, this book is too confusing, too much happens in it. It's just not publishable. And so I didn't let it get me down. I just sent it off to the next agent on my list, and they sent it back again quite nicely, saying the writing was good, but the book was too boring and not enough happens in it. And so I thought I'll send it off to my third and final agent on my short list, because it was costing such a lot of money to send off a great big manuscript in the post and pay for the return postage as well.
Yeah.
And I sent it off to the third agent, and she phoned me up and she told me how much she loved the book. She knew that she could sell it. And that was it. I went up to meet her in London. And I was just so scared and excited. But she took me to meet some publishers, and she sent the books off to the publishers, and they were really enthusiastic. And then there was not a bidding war, but a few did sort of want me. And so she chose the ones that she thought was best for me. So I went to the publisher that was best for me. And that was it. That's how it started.
And getting your work out there, did your life change after the first book was published?
I was still working in the hospital, which was weird, because one minute you've got a violent patient trying to sort of grab you and throw you down on the floor and attack you, but the next moment you'll have a phone call from your publisher saying, would you like to come to this lovely party in this 5-star hotel? And so for about 2 years, I carried on working and writing as well. And it was all going really well. But I was very nervous about giving up work to become a full-time author. But then I found out I was pregnant with my first child. So that seemed like the perfect plan. The plan was that she would sleep all the time and leave me plenty of time to write my books. That didn't quite work out, because she was a complete non-sleeper. But other than that, I mean, it did work out in the end. And it wasn't without more rejections as well, because with that first publisher that I was with, the sales started off with the first book quite well. And then they sort of dipped with each book after that for 5 or 6 books. And then they told me that they weren't going to want any more books from me. And so I was pretty devastated about that. But and then a few other publishers said they didn't want me either. But then one publisher said, we'll have her. And so that's the publisher that I'm with now. And since they took me on, and you don't know what it is that makes it happen, but then they published the first book, and the sales went up and up and up and up and up, and I'm so thrilled that they took the risk with me.
That's Hachette?
Yes,
Hachette
Hachette,
Books?
yes, Headline Publishers, yes,
Okay.
same, and I'm still with the same editor as well,
Yeah.
at Headline with
Yeah.
part of Hachette.
How did your life change after Hachette took you on and the sales went up and up and up? Did you find that, like, because you mentioned that you were struggling, like, financially while working in the NHS, did you feel like you were catapulted into success, or was it more of a kind of gradual process
Well,
that
it
took
was
some
sort of
time?
gradual, and I'm really glad that it was gradual, because I think if you're somebody who has massive success with the very first book, that must be alarming, and then you don't know how you're going to repeat your success. And a lot of authors do freeze then, and sometimes you never hear from them again. But with me, I'd had plenty of rejection by then, and plenty of realizing that you just have to persevere and carry on. Plus, by then you're getting letters and messages from readers, which is another thing that spurs you on. As soon as people tell you lovely things about your books, then that's a great help. So it was sort of gradual, and then I remember we'd gone on holiday with our small children, and it was a fairly grim caravan on a little caravan site, and I got a phone call from my agent telling me that I'd got a new contract, and it was for a lot more money than I'd ever had before. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is my life-changing moment. We're never, ever going to go on a holiday in a caravan again. But the funny thing is, we did, because the children loved it so, so much. So we did.
I love that you had that moment, and what, were you right when you had that moment that, like, things were changing? I mean, you kept going on holidays and caravans, but did things change post that?
Yes, after that one, I sort of bought a lovely car, and we moved to a bigger house, and we've had holidays ever since. I think I went for about 20 years without having any holiday at all.
Wow. Yeah.
I could never afford a holiday when I worked in the hospital. So I
Yeah.
always thought, you see other people scrimping and saving up to go away, and then if something goes wrong with their holiday, they're either taken ill or the weather's awful. You just think, oh, that's their whole year of scrimping and saving. I'd rather just enjoy myself a little bit more throughout the year and not have any
Yeah.
holidays. So I didn't have any holidays for decades.
Wow. Yeah. So something that interests me just as a topic is rejection, our relationship to rejection pre-success, or like whatever you frame as success, versus post. So I think when there's not a lot to lose, like you've never written a book, no one knows who you are, it can, for many people, it can feel less scary because you don't really
Yeah.
have a
Yes,
reputation.
it does. It does. You're right. You're absolutely right. And the longer you go on, I think I'm writing number 37 now. But when I send it off to my agent and my editor, I'm more scared every time that they're going to say, sorry, Jill, this isn't publishable. Let's just scrap this one and try again. And and they laugh at me, and I don't know if they really believe me, but they do know how anxious I get about it. Because when you've spent a whole year writing a book, it does seem very, very boring to you. It's like if you were a reader only reading one book for the whole year. By the end of the year, you're sick to death of it. And it's kind of like that. All my friends, we all hate writing our books, and we all think they're terrible when we finish writing them and send them off. So yes,
I,
it's a nerve-wracking thing. It's the worst part of writing, is waiting for that yes or no reaction to the manuscript.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think that that fear, that anxiety is a sign that you still care? You're still like as equally, if not more, invested in this process than ever before?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. And I'm still always trying to make the next book the best it can possibly be, better than the rest. The one that I'm writing at the moment, I'm nearly halfway through, and I'm still liking it at the moment. It's when you get towards the end and you've been working on it for that much longer, you sort of think, oh dear, is everybody going to hate it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But hopefully they won't. Hopefully they won't.
And navigating that, like, do you have any tools under your belt on how to deal with that self-doubt and anxiety so that you carry on and you get that work out and you don't, yeah, like, is there any kind of strategy on kind of getting that work out in spite of the...
I don't think so. There's no magic answer. You just have to really work on it, and just give it your absolute best shot. Always try and make this book better than the last one. I hate reading Amazon reviews. Most Amazon reviews are fantastic and lovely, but you will always get the bad ones where they say, and they will say it, oh, it's just the same old, same old. She just churns them out. I think I don't churn. I
so
promise I don't churn them.
painstaking work went into that.
And also, if I do get upset by those reviews, then I will go and look at the reviews given to some of my favourite authors about my favourite books, and they've got exactly the same reviews. Okay. And sometimes it's bitter people who've tried to write themselves and not being able to. Sometimes it is. You can find out these things if you know the way. So you just have to not mind too much if you do get bad reviews, and just concentrate on people who tell you that your books have changed their lives or made them able to get through a horrible time in their life. And that means the world to me. It's because I write feel-good fiction, and people are going through awful times sometimes. You know, their husband is dying or has just died, something like that. And they said, I wouldn't have got through it without reading your books. I never thought I would smile again, but your books made me happy. Things like that. That's more important to me than anything.
I love that you touched on that, and I was actually going to ask you about the Amazon reviews because I think you mentioned in an interview, and it's that you sometimes incorporate the feedback. So sometimes someone might say that they want to hear from a male POV.
I have, yes. And I think it can be very helpful when it's constructive feedback. Fantastic, and I will use it. I think we're talking about a particular time when somebody said, I don't feel that I ever get the male main character's point of view. And I was mainly writing from the female character's point of view. And I thought, that's a really good point. And so I started incorporating that. And I think it's helpful. So I'm very grateful to the person that told me that.
I think it's such a healthy way you have of looking at feedback, because when you put your work out there and when there is a big audience, there's lots and lots of people reading, there is going to be constructive insights or suggestions from your community, and there will also be people who will just not like your stuff for the sake of not liking your stuff, or because they just have very different taste.
Exactly. Yeah.
I often will love a book, and then I go into Goodreads and I read a 1-star review, and I'm like, how could two people perceive a book so differently? It's just
absolutely crazy. I mean, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, and I love to see that diversity of reaction. But yes, it can be really helpful. I'm trying to think of other ways as well. I think somebody, I'm trying to think. Somebody she was a lesbian, so she said, I would love to read about lesbian characters. And I'd done it once or twice before, but I sort of did one, and she probably never knew, and she may never have read it. But the next book had a really lovely sort of relationship in there that was very heartwarming and struck a lot of people loved it. So yeah.
Do you know that I give away a copy of every author who comes on the show's book? All you have to do to enter is subscribe to the podcast, review it, send me a screenshot at media@hustlingwriters.com and tell me which book you're answering for. And I might just be mailing you a copy of the book, but also you're helping me grow a show that I am so passionate about, so delusional about. I wanted to be on Times Square. I want to be interviewing the biggest and best authors, and I need all the help I can to get there. Your subscribe means the world. Your review means the world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's resume with the episode. Would love to ask you about that in terms of like the construction of your characters. Your characters are very rich and colorful, and of course you're one person and you have one life, so you need to bring in details and color for many other people and lives, for the diversity of your characters. What does that look like? And do you ever fear that you're going to get it wrong? You're going to misrepresent it, or someone's going to read a book and think that's no one from Cornwall would talk like that, or whatever it is.
Again, I don't know, because now that I'm sort of older, I'm 40 years older than, probably nearly 50 years older since when I first started writing. And so I started writing when I was young, and now I'm quite old. But I've been all those ages, and my children have been all the younger ages. And I think somebody once said, oh, she always has a quirky female teenager in her books. I don't always. I've had a few. But that was sort of based on my daughter. And so in that respect, you write what you know, but then you also know a lot of people. Everybody has sort of family and friends, and you can take little pieces. I would never take a whole person that I knew and put them in a book. But aspects of their characters and the way that they react to things that happen to them, I think I can picture that and invent it, or just take some small aspect of their personality and put it with somebody else's personality and make them a mixture, because everybody is different. That's one of the joys, the lovely things about writing for me. I love my characters, and I sort of don't plan them. As soon as I've got the idea of them in my head, I don't have to ever worry about what they're like anymore. I don't think I write things down about their characters or their personalities. I just sort of know them. And I never know what they look like. I have to write all that down. So when I'm writing, I have these characters in my head, but maybe I'm not seeing them because they're me. I can get to the end of the book and I still have to use my little cheat sheet to find out what the characters look like. But their whole personalities I know straight away from the moment I create them.
Have you ever felt like characters in your book resemble too closely people you know, and you've worried that they might not enjoy seeing themselves written about? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I know what you mean, but no, I don't do that. And what happens, it tends to be men in a pub. If we go to the pub for a drink and somebody will come up and say, is that me, that rock star that you wrote about? That's me, isn't it? Because he's got the same initials as me. And and I think, you're not very good looking. My rock star character is really good looking, but if you want to think that's you, that's fine. I don't think anybody's ever seen a character and not liked them and thought it was based on them, because most people don't think they're unlikable anyway. I mean, it's not based on them, obviously, anyway, because I wouldn't do that. But people don't tend to ally themselves with unlikable characters. And most of my characters aren't unlikable anyway, because I love writing. Even the grumpy, miserable ones, they can be still really... They think they're being grumpy and miserable for a reason, but actually they can break your heart, and they soften up, and they're lovely, really.
As the reader, we see the humanity in them. So
Exactly. Nobody ever thinks they're the baddie.
Yeah. So I was reading through one of your interviews, and you mentioned that you're not a morning person, and that you you often stay up late reading thriller novels. I can't remember, maybe I'm getting that wrong, or crime novels, and you wake up kind of mid-morning. And I'm also not a morning person. Like, I very much stay up late. I often work late and then take a very slow morning. And for a long time, I used to think there's something wrong with me because all like productive, successful people rise early, and that's kind of what I was told. So I was wondering if that was ever something that you thought of, or if this was just something that you just accepted about yourself and
Oh
embraced.
yes, I'm not going to change myself. I mean, I suppose I used to have to get up early to take the children to school, and so that's always a bit of a slog. It's not just getting yourself ready; it's getting children, small children, ready that don't want to go to school necessarily. Um, I just I know lots of authors now, and everybody writes differently at different times. Some like to stay up all night long writing, and I don't really do that now at all. Um, but I like to wake up in the morning and sort of ease myself into the day, and I don't start writing until sort of 10ish. But a lot of my friends, they're up at sort of 5, 6 in the morning, and some of them like to get their 1,000 words a day done by 7 o'clock in the morning, which makes me jealous, but I'm never ever going to be able to do that. So we just have to accept that we do it in different ways. Some authors can write 5,000 words a day. Some can do 10,000 words a day, and that makes me sick. But I'm like a tortoise. I'm quite slow, but I write quite slowly, but then it doesn't need that much alteration afterwards. So it
How many
works out
words
in
a
the
day
end.
do you usually write when
Sorry?
you're in? How many words a day do you write when you're in the flow?
Um, if I do 1,000 words a day, then I'm happy with that. Right towards the end of a book, it's sort of like cycling down a hill, and it's a lot easier by then. And you know the characters exactly what's going to happen. And so that's quite exciting. And so then you can do 2,000 words a day. And yeah, I don't know. I write by hand with fountain pens. So it's I can't write 10,000 words a day. Even if I could,
Yeah.
I couldn't physically, because that would be too much.
And I actually, thanks for bringing that up, because I wanted to ask you on the recording about writing with fountain pens. So you've written with fountain pens your whole writing career. What prompted that? Why did you decide to write with fountain pens?
I just love them. Look, I'm going to show you some now.
Yay. And they're glittery. Is
They
the
are
ink
glittery.
glittery or the pens are glittery?
I buy these Bennu pens. As soon as I discovered Bennu pens, they became. I've got
Amazing.
lots. I've got lots, but they're absolutely beautiful. And that one exactly matches the cover of my latest book.
Amazing. I just wrote a note here to order
And
some.
I've got lovely inks as well. And so I love writing with different coloured inks. And then when the ink runs out, I'll change to a slightly different colour.
Yeah.
It just makes me happy.
I read somewhere that you've changed color every 10 pages or so, and I just loved that so much because I feel like I'm very big on kind of creating dopamine, like doing the things that bring us joy.
Oh, well, 10
And
pages, 10 handwritten foolscap pages is about how much ink a pen holds at one time.
yeah,
So
yeah,
by then
yeah.
I'll sort of run out of ink and
Now it's time for a new color.
yeah.
And do you have a story about your first book? Do you mind sharing that? What happened to your first book, your first manuscript that you wrote by hand?
Well, yes, it was. I tell myself it probably wasn't very good, but I always wonder if it was quite good. I wrote the whole book. I didn't have a typewriter at the time, which was what you needed then. Typewriter. I think a lot of younger people now don't know what one is. But a friend of my husband's who worked with him, my husband at the time, she offered to type the manuscript for me. And I was thrilled. She said she didn't want any money for doing it. She'd just love to do it. And I was going to pay her because I knew it was a big job. And so I gave her my one and only copy of my manuscript. And I never saw it again, ever. I kept asking my husband, how's she getting on? He said, oh, she's really enjoying writing, typing it up. She thinks it's fantastic. She's really enjoying it. But I never actually got any typing back, and in the end, one day I said, "Oh, how's she getting along?" And he said, "Oh, she's left the company now. She's moved away from the city." So I never saw her again. And back then there was no way of keeping in touch with anybody, especially if they didn't want you to. So I think she just thought she'd offer because she was a nice person, but then it was a much bigger job than she was expecting, because it's a lot. If it's nearly 100,000 words, that's a big task. And I just think she thought, "Oh, I'm sick of this." So it never came back to me. I can remember quite a lot about it. I always wonder if it's still somewhere in the world, maybe stuffed up in an attic somewhere.
Did you ever, with your next novel, did you try to rewrite that novel?
No,
the first
no,
one?
no.
No?
It was just easier to just write something completely different. It would be so hard to try and remember and rewrite it, but realize that you weren't getting it right.
Yeah.
I think it would. I think I knew that it would be so heartbreakingly difficult that it was much easier to write. So I wrote Fast Friends, which was my first ever published book, and it did really quite well. So really well for a first time unknown author. So
do you think that losing that first novel made your second novel better, because now you had the practice of writing a whole novel?
Yes, this is what I tell myself. This is what I tell myself, that if somebody did suddenly contact me and say, "Guess what I've found in this house?" and because I suppose it will have my name on it. But yes, if it did reappear, I possibly would reread it and think, "Oh no, that's not as great as I thought it was." But at the time, it was exactly what I wanted to write. And it was a real sort of heart-stopping, emotional, life or death story. The kind that I still love writing now. So who knows? Maybe one day it'll turn up.
I mean, we live in a social media era. Have you ever looked up the person? Do you remember her name?
She did. I can't remember her name now, but she did have a very unusual name. But actually, I can't remember it now.
Yeah, it'd be funny to try to track her down and say,
I think she wouldn't want to be tracked down, and I wouldn't do that too. Let's just say that was a practice book.
Yeah. I mean, for all we know, your writing career was such a big success because the book you went out into the world with was a even better version than the first one.
Absolutely, yes.
Something that you also have mentioned is that you have a writing community that you regularly meet with. And I believe that community is the cornerstone of having a resilience towards rejection, building a rejection resilience muscle. Can you tell me a little bit about your writing community, how often you meet, and what kind of support you
I've
offer
sort
each
of
other?
got several. There's one, we started a Zoom group during lockdown so that we could all keep in touch and see each other when you couldn't see anybody. And we've carried that on ever since. We do that. I did it yesterday. It was lovely. And we go away on writing retreats together. And some of them do loads of writing. I don't. I'm there for the, we talk about the publishing industry, and we sort of just keep up with everything. We all know different people as well, so it sort of spreads out and you hear all the different stories, good and bad, about the publishing industry and what's happened to authors that we know. I've got some others that sort of live fairly locally, and we meet up for lunches sort of a few times a year. I mean, you could spend all the time you want meeting up with friends, but in the end, you do have to go and write a book as well. So you can't do it every day.
Do you guys hold each other accountable?
Yes, I suppose. Yes, I mean, we would never say bad things about each other's work, but I will I will ask questions about my book if I'm getting myself into a hole and I don't know how to get out of it. And everybody loves helping other people get out of a plot hole more than working out their own. So if one of my friends says, "Oh, I've got stuck here now. What could I do next? Should it be this or should it be that? Or is there another way to get around this?" We'll all dive in and come up with loads of ideas. And yes, it's one of those things that it's much nicer to do for other people for some reason than it is for yourself. If you do it for yourself, it's just a slog. It's hard work.
I think it's harder to see something that we've worked on so personally than it is to see kind of with someone else's work. We're the outsider, so
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
little bit less personal. It's like looking at a box from the inside. Did you always have a writing community earlier on in your career when you
Not
first
early
started?
on at all, no. It was like years before I ever met any other author. I mean, this was pre-internet. And yeah, there was no way to meet anybody. And I was living down in Bristol, had small children, couldn't really sort of whiz up to London for random little sort of lunches and things back then. But gradually, I suppose the publishers hold the occasional big party, and so you'll meet people whose names you know but you've never met, and it's so lovely to meet them. And nearly every single writer I've ever met has been great. I mean, honestly, maybe we just show our best sides when we're meeting other authors.
Generally, writers are good people, so that's my theory.
I think so. I think so. And I love all the sort of the bloggers and the people that work in bookshops and librarians. I just zoom into them, and I just think book people are lovely people.
Yeah, I agree. So before you had your writing community, did it ever feel like quite a lonely practice trying to get your writing out there and just generally writing and keeping the habit?
Yes, it did. And I was always a person that never wanted to be on my own ever. So my friends thought it was hilarious when I said that I was going to give up work and have a baby and just write full time. They said, "You won't want to do that when you're on your own." And it sounds a bit fanciful and silly, but if I was at home on my own all day not writing, I would find it quite lonely. But when you are in the middle of writing a book and your head is full of your characters and the things that's happening with them, you don't feel as if you're on your own because you are there sort of interacting with all these characters and deciding what they're all going to do next. I love deciding what is going to happen next all the time. But yeah, so it's not like being on your own because you've got all your characters that you have to deal with.
Makes me think I had very active imagination as a child, probably still do, but I spent a lot of time playing by myself, and it was seen as quite strange because lots of other kids, needed to be around other people, and I could just be by myself. And it was probably because I was making up stories the whole time, and I wasn't alone in that sense. So, in
Well,
your writings,
I do
sorry.
that, and I always did do that, but we don't know how much or how little other people do that because
Yeah.
everybody's in their own head. But I know that when I'm on the train, I look at everybody in the carriage and I wonder who they are, and I make up stories about them, and I wonder where they're going. And then I look out the train window and I see a lovely house up on a hill, and I wonder who lives there. And I don't know if other people do that or not, but I never stop. I'm just doing it all the time. And I love doing it, and I couldn't not do it.
It's a great way of keeping yourself entertained, if nothing else. I mean, obviously, it makes for great stories too. But I'm very glad that I have that ability because, as you say, you're on the train or you're doing whatever. It's just fun to kind of have that
That's
imagination
it. It
active.
is. And
And
people ask me where I get the ideas from for my books, and it's just everywhere. And it can be just looking out of a train window and seeing a particular house on a hill, and that sets you off. Or sometimes you just see one person, and something about them makes you want to wonder about their life, and then use that idea that you've got from them without knowing them at all.
Yeah.
But you just take that and use it.
Do you think that you started picking up these threads and kind of seeing stories, and whether it's strangers or whatever, more and more because you were practicing it more and more? Like, do you ever remember kind of feeling short of ideas, perhaps when you first started writing novels versus
Not
now?
when I started writing novels at all. I think my problem now is it's more difficult after 37 books to come up with ideas that you've never used before. And sometimes I will start writing and I think, oh, this is fantastic, this is brilliant, I haven't done this before. And then I'll suddenly remember that I used that scenario in a book that I wrote over 30 years ago. And you can guarantee if I leave it like that, somebody will read that book and then my new book, one after the other, and then they'll write and tell me, oh, you've just used the same plot, again. And I tend to have a lot of characters in my books and sort of various subplots weaving their way through it. So it's quite hard. So it does get more hard to think of original ideas that I haven't used before. But at the beginning, there's millions of ideas and you haven't used any of them before, so you can just take your pick.
Do you have a process to try and make sure your idea has never been used before? If memory fails you, is there kind of a way to check that this is not an idea you've used before?
No, I've never kept track of anything like that. I just have to sometimes, obviously, some things are reusable because they're fairly, like a man, his wife has just suddenly gone off with his best friend. I mean, this happens a lot, and it could happen in two separate books because there'll be different characters and there'll be different situations and different resolutions. But it does get harder to remember, and I wish I had written down everything from the start. But I never did. I never kept tabs of all the names I've used, which also causes problems because I sometimes have characters from previous books popping up in newer books with little cameo appearances. So regular readers will say, oh, is that so-and-so? And sometimes it isn't. I've just accidentally used the same name twice. Sometimes I've used the same name 3 times in one book, but hopefully the editor sorts that out.
Perhaps someone can come and read all your books and create a very easy to navigate document that shows all the characters and all the names.
I think that would be a massive task now. Yes, we muddle on the best we can, and I think I've used up all the names there are in the baby names books. Anyway, by now.
So you can probably reuse names. I feel like that's okay. That's understandable when there's, and so that makes me think of one question, and we'll start closing up soon. But just one of my second to last question. You do things a little bit differently to what I think a lot of people might tell you is not what you do when writing novels, in the sense that you have many characters in your novels. And you also don't write sex scenes, right, for romance. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And if you've ever had any pushback.
Well, when I first started writing, it was the age of the bonkbuster. Did you know that term? Tended to be lots of sex and shopping and rich people. Bonkbuster. Okay. And my mum had said she'd type my first book once she'd got herself a computer. She said she'd type it, and I just thought, I don't want her typing sex scenes that I've written. And I know that some people love reading sex scenes and some people just don't. And my mum and all her friends, they used to say, oh no, don't read that one, it's you wouldn't like it, kind of thing. And I just thought, I don't think I would be very comfortable writing sex scenes anyway. So I just never did. I chose not to. And I don't think anybody ever misses. If a book is good and entertaining, you don't need them there. Some people prefer that they're not, sex scenes aren't in there. And that was when my mum was typing them, and then my daughter started typing them after my mum died, and that made it even worse. She would just go, ugh, old people. It was maybe she was 15 when she started typing them. And if there was a character of 30 kissing a character of 32, she would say, oh, this is gross, old people, ugh, typing away. So I just thought, no, let's leave it, no, off the page. There's plenty of it going on, but it's off the page. And that suits me. You work out the ways to write that you're comfortable writing with.
Yeah. My mom was British, I guess. Her parents are British, and so we'd always have kind of. And I would watch American TV, and sometimes it'd be British TV, and the comments should always have about TV is like, the American movies always are over sexualized and like way too sexual, and British TV is just like, it's not so on the nose. It's just like a common comment, so I can kind of understand where that comes from. And having lots of characters, was that something that you ever had pushback from? I know you mentioned in some of your earlier
No, I think that's my style now, and people accept that, and most of them really love it. But for me, it's a way. I don't know how to not have lots of characters, because any hero and heroine, they have friends, they have family, they have people that they work with, and I didn't want them just to all be secondary characters with nothing happening. I think it's much more interesting if they've got things happening in their lives as well. And so sometimes I do have to try and not have more characters in my books, but I do like having intertwining subplots, keeping it clear. People don't get muddled. They always say that it's really easy to keep them all separate when you're reading the book. But it's just the way I write, and I don't think I would be able to write a book with just two main characters. I would get bored. I need more characters than that.
And I think what's like lovely is that you have subplots for your characters, because I think my observation when having too many characters hasn't worked is when it's all kind of rooted on the protagonist storyline, and all of these characters are just playing a supporting role in their storyline, so they have no storylines of their own. Then they become, I think, a lot more forgettable. But then when they have their own storylines, their own plots, you're invested in their stories too.
That's it.
So my final question for you is, are there any risks or what I like to call rejection goals, or things that you're setting out to do that perhaps you've never done before, professionally or personally, or that you would like to do in your life?
I don't know. Oh gosh. Well, writing wise, I mean, people no. Personally, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. I do things. I've just come back from a week in Venice because I'm setting my next book in Venice. And I go on my own, and I meet loads of other people there, and we all end up really good friends. It's lovely. It's so easy and natural. And so that's something I don't think I ever would have thought of doing all those years ago, but I do that. And professional wise, I mean, I've sold, I think it's 15 million copies of my books now, which I never imagined in a million years would happen. A lot of my friends have had their books made into movies, and I think the reason that's not happened to me is because I have so many characters in the books. So it doesn't my style of writing doesn't lend itself to film, although lots of people say they wish they could be made into movies, and I would of course I have had rejections from film studios, producers, because it's very hard to get a book made into a film, but I would love that to happen.
Let's put that out into the universe. I think it could work brilliantly. And also as a TV series. Like, TV series, there's more time to explore all the subplots. And,
absolutely. I mean, I would love that to happen. Obviously, if it was a really good production, it would be great. That would be a lovely thing. Yeah. Okay. And you never know. That's the thing. You never know, because now somebody might buy the rights to a book that somebody wrote 50 years ago. It can happen at any day. It just hasn't happened to me yet.
Yeah, put it into the universe that it happens, not in 50 years' time.
Yeah.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for your time. For those listening, you can order a copy of all of Jill's books, including her latest book, on Amazon or your local bookstores, indie bookstores in the UK. Jill, can they order them in other countries? Like, do you know, are you distributed in the US?
Yes, distributed in the US as well,
Okay,
yes.
so US bookstores too.
And South
And
Africa.
South Africa. Okay. And I'll be giving away a copy to a listener who subscribes and reviews the podcast. And just email screenshots to media@hustlingwriters.com, and you can specify which of Jill's books you want. The instructions and link to Jill's book on the show notes. Thank you again, Jill.
Thank you so much. It's been lovely. I've enjoyed this.
Me
Thanks.
too. This was My Rejection Story, hosted by me, Alice Draper. Thank you for listening to today's episode of My Rejection Story. I hope this conversation was as fun as I had recording it. I enjoy every episode. So just a reminder that you can win a copy of a book every single week. I do a giveaway of the author I interviewed. So if you love this conversation and you really want to grab your get your hands on a copy of the book, please enter the giveaway. All you have to do is subscribe and review the podcast and email me at media@hustlingwriters.com. And if you've already done it, you can do it from another app. And if you've already done it on all your apps, you could also just borrow a friend's phone, do it from a friend's phone, and let me know, like, on the screenshots that you did it on a friend's phone, because the more reviews and subscribes, the more likely I am to grow the show and make this podcast even bigger and better than it is, perhaps even get some funding, be able to invest money back in the show, and really just deliver on my promise to you, which is to make this as good as I can. So I just want to say a huge thank you quickly to my team, Christina Schild, Samantha Dubé, and Chechofacho Ndabane. This show would not be here if it wasn't for them and their tireless work and belief in this mission. And then a huge thank you to the distribution partners. So there are some amazing people out here trying to get the word out to their networks, and also people that I think you will find extremely helpful, because if you want to write a book and get a book out there, these are experts in book writing and book publishing. So a couple of writing coaches who are highly recommended in my field: Emily Tameo Maher, Lindy Feel, Tracy Stewart, and Javasia Harris Bowler are all highly recommended writing coaches. And I know so many people who have used writing coach, and it's really helped them get the word out there and get the book out there and not just stay stuck in that draft phase. So their details are all in the show notes. And then also Nick Courtwright is the CEO of a hybrid publishing house, which is an interesting way of publishing a book, and it's highly recommended. Many of my clients have gone through it with great success. You can find out all of Nick's details in the show notes as well. And if you have any questions about them or need their contact details because for some reason you can't find them, pop me an email. And thank you again for listening to the show. I'll see you next week for another conversation. And yeah, have a great Wednesday.